Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christy, and I would like to welcome you to the Doylestown Bookshop's virtual event series. We're so happy to welcome Zach Wilcox and Kenny Porter as they discuss Fearless, a touching graphic novel about growing up, accepting change, and finding a way to be happy when you miss your best friend. Our guests will be in conversation for 20 to 30 minutes. After that, they will take questions from you, the viewers. If you would like to submit a question, please click on Ask a Question on your screen and enter your question there. If you're on a phone or tablet, click the icon with the question mark to submit your questions. If you would like to purchase Fearless from the Doylestown or Lahaska bookshops, click the button on your screen that says Buy the Book. We have curbside pickup available at both of our locations and ship worldwide. We should still have a few signed copies left at Doylestown. If you would like to get a signed copy, please note that in the order comments section at checkout when you order with us online. I've had a few questions from viewers who are used to Zoom events, so to avoid any confusion, only the authors and I will have access to video and audio. You can interact with us through the live chat and during the Q&A. Now a little bit about our guests. Kenny Porter is a comic book writer living in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's written for DC Comics, Sega, Image, Top Cow, and more. He's graduated with a BA in writing from Grand Valley State University. Zachary Wilcox is a Philadelphia-based artist. He has a master's degree in fine arts for sequential art from Savannah College of Art and Design and a BS in digital media from Drexel University. He specializes in comics, illustration, and concept art. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
you for having us.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about Fearless, how it was created, the art, all of it.
Well, we're excited to talk about it. Yeah. All right. Awesome. The floor is ours, Zach.
Yeah, let me nervously sip my juice.
Well, thank you everybody for coming. We're really excited to talk about the book. We put a lot of love and time into this. We're really excited that it's out in the world. And we just kind of want to talk about how we came up with the book, a little bit of our personal experiences that went into it, and just, some fun behind the scenes stuff, and, just have a good time talking about the book. And we're excited to hear your questions too, whether it's about the story or Zach's incredible artwork or, the process of creating the book. We're really excited to talk about it. So I think we'll go ahead and kick off. Zach, would you like me to jump into how this book came together first, or do you want to give a little bit of background?
Well, I guess just like real quick, Kenny and I actually met through a mutual friend of mine, Gail Gilligan, who is the artist on the Babysitter Club books. She introduced us through Twitter because Kenny had like some spare projects he was working on. She didn't have time to finish those up, so we started talking, and then I guess from there, like that's kind of where Fearless came from. But yeah, you can.
Gail, who's super nice and super talented. Everyone should check out her books. They're amazing. Yes. She's a super talented artist and storyteller. She hooked us up, and just after a quick phone call, immediately started gelling. We have the same weird sense of humor, have all the same like cultural touch points in terms of like books we love, shows we love. So we really got together and got along really well. And like Zach said, I had a bunch of ideas that I've been working on and was looking for someone who was, could capture that vision. And Zach is incredibly talented and was willing to work on any crazy idea I threw him. So we started collaborating and coming up with all these ideas. Like we took a lot of stuff that we both enjoy, like giant robot infused things or very personal stories about, kids growing up and learning hard lessons. We tried to mix a lot of those things together and try to come up with personal stories to pitch through our agent to different publishers. The one that ended up sticking most recently was Fearless, which we worked on, which I think, if I remember correctly, I called you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I called you while I was like running errands and grocery shopping, and I was like, I have an idea. It's a girl on a bike with a helmet, and she ran away because her best friend moved away and won't talk to her. And I could like hear your hand hit the desk. You're like, yes, tell me more. Like, and from there we just started running because, growing up, like the switch from elementary school to middle school, I don't feel like it gets talked about a lot in media. And for me, it was super hard because at the time they completely switched where everyone in my grade was going and the tiers. So I got separated because of school district changes from anyone I ever grew up with. So I wanted to kind of tell a story about that and how, you know, friendships change, and as people move away or you get separated, like there's a natural just kind of growth and change that happens, and change is super scary. So I wanted to try to do that in a way that felt, you know, true to my experiences, true to Zach's experiences, and hopefully true to other people's experiences, and, you know, other kids who might be going through that now or have gone through it. And then Zach, I think if you want to talk a little bit about it, because I know I brought a very like personal, you know, exact story from my past into it, where a friend and I had just grown apart in terms of interests. But I know we talked a lot through the story and everything. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about, you know, your experiences with that and how we incorporated some of that into the story?
Yeah, what initially really grabbed me about the story was Kara using this external character, this fictional character, to relate to other people. So I obviously didn't have the same experience growing up that Kenny did, where, you know, we all split up after middle school. But seeing her kind of relate to the world around her through this fictional character is what really got me excited about the story, because I just absolutely am obsessed with media, like consuming media and using it to relate to the world around me. And watching Kara do that is something that I think is important for kids to see. Like, if you see the world in a certain way, or if you can't understand why other people are acting a certain way, and you want to parallel that with a narrative that you're familiar with or comfortable, I think that's why storytelling is so important. So that's what really grabbed me about the story. And also, I just kind of really love that Kara is not a perfect protagonist. I'm not a huge fan of people who feel like wildly plucky all the time for no reason. But when I read Kenny's script and I saw how Kara was acting, it felt like she was deflecting things that upset her about her real life into this sort of wild positivity. And I really love her energy for that. Like, throughout the course of the book, you see her get more and more amped about what's going on and struggling against it so much. But by the end, she finally realizes that, you know, maybe that's not the way to approach your problems, just blind positivity and excitement.
Yeah, that's an awesome way to put it. And I did just realize I don't think we've necessarily completely hit on the premise of the book.
Oh,
so
that's a very good point.
I realized that while we were deep diving. So before we deep dive anymore, so the book is basically about this girl named Kara, who is super into this TV show that she loves and she shares with her best friend Alice. They, you know, dress up in cosplay and stuff and play it all the time. And they're moving from elementary school to middle school. And they're both kind of nervous about it, what's going to happen. And that summer, Alice has to move away suddenly. So their friendship and all their plans kind of shatter. And when she doesn't, you know, answer Kara's calls or emails anymore or anything, Kara can't get a hold of her. She decides to take inspiration from that TV show she loves and hops on her bike and rides 2 towns over to try to win her best friend back. So it's all the crazy misadventures she has along the way. And then a big, you know, realization confrontation, which I won't spoil, that happens at the end that really speaks to what Zach was talking about, her character. So that's kind of what we put into it. And, you know, we wanted to bring a lot of those big sort of sprawling stories that felt almost like episodic, even though it's one story. There's a lot of like small story arcs throughout it, because we really wanted to bring like a large sort of character study, even though it only takes place over the course of a day. We wanted to feel like a big day that was like the most important day of her life, as she got to know who she was. So that's just a little background, because I noticed I realized real quick we didn't.
Yeah, thanks for stopping me there. Almost.
No problem. My brain's good at checking that thing and checking back. So, yeah, that's how we came up with it in terms of working on it. I'm sure, like, I don't know how many people know this or anything, but in terms of putting it together, Zach and I talked on the phone all the time about what should the TV show she likes be influenced by, what should she look like as a character. Zach would send me these amazing concept art things, and we'd have to pick together out of which one, like what's our character going to look like and what's the world going to look like. So we went through that for probably weeks, like just figuring out the look and style. And from there, I wrote some sample script pages. We had to decide, like, we had to pick a scene from the entire book without writing it yet that would best like kind of crystallize and showcase what the story was about. So we talked it over and we thought, like, the best part that you'd like want in a movie trailer if you were to watch it is the part where she's seemingly getting ready to go to school and then runs away. So we did a whole big sequence of that, of her doing that, running away with her adorable pet ferret Gidget and packing her up and all of her gear. And we created these pitch pages that we used with our agent Mark to send out to publishers, and put this whole package together, describe the whole story, where we wanted to go with it, what themes we wanted to cover. And from there, that's when we got contacted by Scholastic and Graphics. They were interested in putting the book together, which we were so happy for, that we get to, work on this project and bring something that was super personal to life. It was real fun coming up with all that stuff. Like, the story grew and evolved over time. And I know that Zach put a ton of work into the pages, which all look amazing and outstanding. I couldn't ask for anything better. That's right. You're going to have to take a compliment live, whether you like it or not. So yeah, I really enjoy working with Zach, and I'm glad I got to do work on this project with him. Zach, do you want to talk a little bit about your influence and how you designed the characters in the world and stuff based on how we came up with the story?
Just talking specifically more about like the pre-visualization work, where we're working on like
Sure.
where she lives, what she wears. I think that was a lot of fun for me, was to develop kind of her outfit. It took me forever. And I drew this jacket, this like wildly complicated jacket with all of these little stripes and patches. And I remember when we were going through the edits, they were like, you forgot her patches, on page 64, panel 3. You forgot her zipper on page 20. I will never draw a jacket this complicated ever again in my entire life. But I do think it really speaks to her character. She loves this show so much. Like, she wants to incorporate as much of it as she can into a real life. So her outfit is sort of like, it's not exactly cosplay, but it's as close as she can get to the character from the show while still looking almost like a normal kid, even though she has small jewels on her cuffs. But designing Gidget, the little ferret, was also incredibly fun, because I always wanted a ferret growing up, and my parents would not let me have one because apparently they smell really bad. But there is a lot of work that went into just designing the fictional world of the show. I remember there is a bird monster on one page in one panel that is about this big. I spent an entire day designing, because Kenny was like, yeah, it'll be on TV. And like, they're fighting. She's like fighting this bird monster. And I was so excited by this. I don't know why. I spent like a day or two designing this bird monster, and it's that big in the whole book. But I do not regret a second of it. Yeah, I really think it panned out pretty well. Finding like the art style for the book, I just sort of let it come naturally. I guess because we were working on this book for younger readers, I tried to lighten my style up a little bit. Like, I'm not sure exactly how to put this, but kind of round things out, make them like a little bit more cozy and comfortable and presentable and like sort of joyous, instead of like, grungy or something. But it really came super naturally when I finished reading the script. I was like, I kind of know what I want this to look like.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it really speaks to it. There's a panel where the mom is wearing a sweater that I honestly would want to look so comfy and cozy the way that you drew it. It looks like it would be super fun to wear.
She honestly was like one of my favorite characters to draw, because the whole book, she's just like showing up in a new outfit, and like everybody else pretty much wears the same outfit. She's got like 2 different t-shirts and a jacket and a sweater over the course of one day. And I remember one of our editors was like, is it okay that she keeps changing clothes so much? And I was like, she's just trying to look good, man.
She likes to have a wardrobe change. She was going to meetings and stuff too. Yeah. She was busy. She was going back and forth to meetings. Yeah.
That was our excuse.
No, yeah, you adding that style to it was great. And all the extra detail you put in, like, I feel like it was really important to make sure that the fake show that she likes, which is like a superhero show inspired by a lot of American and Japanese superhero shows, because we're both big fans of like tokusatsu and special effects stuff from Japan, as well as American superheroes. We wanted to make sure that it was a good mix of that, and that it felt like a real show that she really liked.
Yeah, I needed it to be something that like you would be excited about watching yourself, to understand why she was so obsessed with it. Yeah.
Because then when she calls references to it and stuff, it would be similar to, like if a kid was talking about how much they were inspired by Spider-Man and like trying to imitate him like in their decisions, because she hides a lot of her emotional problems behind the character, like saying like, oh, well, the character would do this. And she thinks she's doing the right things because, you know, she's projecting that the character would do this and I love the character and I am that character. You know, I think that building out that fictional thing, all the extra work you did into the bird monster and the henchmen and stuff,
it's worth it. It's worth
on TV. It was definitely worth it, and it's awesome because I've had some of my friends' kids ask me if that's a real show and if we stole it from something.
That is,
it's like
my nephew's absolute favorite parts of the book are the parts where obviously, I mean,
yeah,
they're like 6-year-old boys, so they're
like, is that real? Like,
are they fighting?
Yeah,
she's got a sword.
They're like, no, it's not. But that's like that was the goal, was to make it feel so real that it was an actual thing. So that's really awesome that, you know, kids are reacting to it and that it actually worked for the story. So if that, I feel like if that hadn't sold it, like it probably would have fallen flat on its face a little bit. So like, great job of selling that with the artwork, my dude. Very impressed by it. It's awesome. In terms of like the rest of the story and, you know, us bringing our experiences and everything to it, a lot of it is like, it's all fiction, but a lot of it is inspired by just like real emotional feelings and stuff we've had. She meets along the way a lot of people who are having problems either with family members or with bullies or, you know, just loneliness and stuff from people who moved away. So along the story, you know, while she's trying to help these other people, you know, we get to see all these reflective moments of, you know, things that growing up we wish we would have known ourselves, about how people change or people move away, or somebody who was close to you could end up becoming, you know, like an antagonist just through your personalities changing. So we try to put a lot of that into the story, to try to make it, you know, connect with people from all different types of backgrounds, like people who've experienced different forms of change and growing up. You know, I feel like a lot of our own personal stuff went into it. So to be able to share that with everyone is a huge honor. And we're really glad that, you know, people are interested to hear about this character we created that we hope stands in for a lot of people, you know, that go through this. So that was always the goal. Zach, is there a specific moment in terms of a scene or something we worked on that was like either really fun to work on or like was really challenging that you want to talk about, like one of your favorite ones? And then I'll go.
So the hardest scene to work on was she is in like this sort of garden store, and it's a store full of all of these knickknacks, and just drawing all of them was difficult. But
I didn't make it easy for you. I'm sorry.
Hardest like scene to draw, as in the most difficult, would probably be, there's a scene where she is biking to the next town and a thunderstorm happens, and it's sort of like I guess like the dark night of the soul for her, where things just sort of are not going well. And it was really hard to like make the character that's so plucky and happy have this genuinely rough time for a few pages. I felt bad for her, you know, you kind of want to like go and help her out. And thankfully there is somebody who ends up helping her out of that situation. And it's not all bad. She makes another new friend, which is, as she is often doing. But yeah, I guess that during the storm, I think it was only like 4 or 5 pages, but Kenny left me a lot of room for full page spreads, which means instead of lots of little panels, we were putting like big panels in there for this storm to kind of give me more time to illustrate them and to have like a really big impact on the reader that like, this is a bad storm. She like is making some poor decisions right now. So somebody help her.
Yeah, that
probably.
Okay. Yeah, that was a fun and difficult scene, like to nail, because like you said, she'd been putting up this front of being plucky and stuff for so long that we needed to kind of have like the armor fall off a bit, and show that she's second guessing what she did, and the decisions that she's made. But like you said, I think that visually, the way that you illustrated that, like I always admire and I think is absolutely wonderful and really sells that point of like her realizing like, not just like, oh no, like I'm caught in a storm, like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, it's sort of the whole weight of everything kind of sinking in. And I think by that point, she's done her little like episodes and met all of her new little friends, and it kind of becomes she's operating by the rules of her favorite television show because that's the narrative she most understands. But then she's meeting all these new people and collecting new narratives and sort of understanding how these people interact with the world. And I feel like it's a huge, very rapid growth moment for her where she's like, yes, this is a story that I love, but there's other stories out there, and how do people incorporate that into their lives? She's taking these things and kind of incorporating them as the journey goes on. So her full confidence at the beginning in I will be this character from this TV show and I will succeed starts to dwindle as she, you know, meets new people and learns new like perspectives on life, and, you know, watches them struggle as well.
Oh man, I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah, that absolutely. Like that's what the story is all about, and that's what we tried to bring to this. And like you said earlier at the beginning of the recording, like we wanted to have kind of a different protagonist than, you know, general middle grade or YA fiction of someone who like clearly is a good person but has a lot to learn.
Right.
And,
yeah. And there's also a lot of like really shy characters, and shy characters are good, but I think there's, you know, loud people need representation too. What about,
absolutely.
Okay, real quick, was there anything that was your favorite part to write? Something that like you really like breezed through, like you were like, it just kind of flowed out?
I think surprisingly enough, which I won't spoil, the part that came the easiest to me was when she meets up with her friend again, which is like a big emotional moment.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like that would have been the hardest. It's like the last like 5 pages of the book, so we're not gonna.
Yeah, that came super easy. Like by the time I got there, it just felt right, and I was able to do it. So that one was real easy. I think another one that was real fun to do was there's a sequence in one of the adventures she goes on involves like a bicycle thief. And that one was also kind of good because it was one of the first times where she was encountering a challenge that she couldn't completely solve on her own.
Right.
So that was really fun and was fun to do because it started to show the like, you know, she had been like, I can solve anything. And it was like, okay, well, maybe not.
It's like, it's a very slow progression. I think narratively, like probably not going to happen to you in real life, but narratively to kind of sum up the experience, it's like, it's very, the first problem that she meets is like something that she is very ready for. And then the next one is like, oh no. And then the third one is like, I barely helped at all.
Exactly. That's the kind of progression I wanted to go through. Just like the challenges, you know, because as you get older, like you're used to encountering problems that you know how to deal with. And the older you get and as things change and you have to change, you have to encounter new problems that you've never had before. And you have to try to use that problem solving to solve it. Sometimes you can't do it on your own. And so a lot of that. So I'm glad to hear that kind of resonated and worked, because I don't think we'd ever talked about that before.
No, dude, I mean, to be honest, like I spent so long drawing the book, but aside from us talking about the actual story, I thought about it a lot, especially when we were nearing the end. I was really trying to like, I'm not sure, but like when I was, you know, you're drawing the characters and they have to act a certain way. And I'm like really trying to get into their heads and be like, how would I act in this situation? What would my body language be? Would I be like scared? Would I be like open? Would I be cowering? And it's sort of through that, like trying to decipher, you know, their like expressions that I like came to understand the story much better than just reading the script, which is another thing is why I think it works so well as a graphic novel, because Kenny's writing is fantastic, but a lot of it is like he's writing this not as like this hyper detailed, hyper processed work. It's sort of more real. And if you don't see the characters and how they're interacting with the world, then it would be much wordier and much less like, I don't know how to explain it. It's very
less action oriented in the moment.
Yeah.
That's the one thing with I think that's one of the big things just talking about, like the difference between, you know, a novel or like comics, is that a lot of times, even with just slice of life stuff, it feels like it's more in the moment just because it's a more visual medium and you get to go at the pace that the artwork's doing it in. So that's why I wanted to try to bring something that was a bit, give her an action-oriented persona, because I feel like it adds another level to the slice of life thing and gives you someone to root for in a realistic situation. Although the only thing that's unrealistic in the story is that I think that Science would want to talk to her about this ferret that completely understands English.
Her all-knowing rodent that is fully aware of where to find shelter during a storm and sort of
understands English and can point to things and everything.
There's been a lot of people who, like, when I'm posting about this on social media, I'll post like a page with Gidget in it, and people are like, "Oh, I didn't know there was a ferret in it. I got to get this book now." And I'm like, that's the thing that's hooking you right now?
I've seen the same. Like, I've seen people
cartoon ferret. People are like, "There's never any ferret representation."
Yeah.
I was like, that's not the point of the book, but I really appreciate what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the part where we have to admit that ferrets did pay for the complete creation of the book, and that it was funded exclusively by a room full of ferrets and little business suits. Yes. Very proper little business ferrets paid for the whole thing. But no, yeah, I think it's a fun sort of thing. And speaking of which, because you mentioned, my mom did have a pet ferret for a little while. Yep, there she is. The adorable.
Really? See, I'm so jealous.
Yeah, she did.
I really wanted one.
The ferret's name was Rupert. It was an albino ferret, so it was all pure white with red eyes.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
We'll make a very good antagonist ferret if we ever do this.
An evil rival for Gidget. Yep. Yeah. So I tried to put that in too, just because I know my mom really liked Rupert and everything. So I thought that would be a nice little addition. And like you said, there aren't a lot of ferrets in stories, so
it's true.
That's always fun
too. The representation they deserve.
Mm-hmm. In terms of we've talked a lot about like how we made it and things we put into it and stuff. And our influences. A lot of times after something's come out, like, it's hard to believe that it's actually finished and like out in the world now, like because we've been so close to it for so long and everything. It just seemed like something that hadn't happened. So like, how have you been feeling now that it's done and everything? Like, are you having like nostalgic feelings or everything? Are you just ready for people to read it and to get it out in the world? Like, let's get real here, Zach. Let's crack it open.
Really, to be honest, I honestly kept thinking this book took us 2.5 years from start to finish to get onto shelves, which is when my brain read that they first were like, yeah, it'll come out in 2021. And when I first read that, my brain was like, that's not a real year. Because we were in 2019 and I was like, that can't possibly be in my lifetime. 2021, that's the future. That's the far future. So when we finished the book, after working on it, so I had signed an NDA, which means, obviously I'm not allowed to share the artwork until it's finished, until Scholastic says, yeah, this looks good. This is quality for us to put out there. So I couldn't show anybody. And I'm not a math guy, but, 5 pages is like the average for, or 5 panels is the average for a page. So that's 5, and then there's like 186 pages. So 5 times 186, I'm not doing it, but it's a big number. That many drawings, I never got to show to anybody for 2.5 years. And I love showing people drawings. That's like my whole thing. So I kept thinking right before the book came out, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get crushed by a falling cartoon piano before I can like see this book on shelves. Like, I need to see it out. And now that it's out, I really do feel wonderful. I'm so excited. I feel very new chapter. I cannot wait to force Kenny to write me another book so we can keep the hype train going.
You don't got to force me.
But yeah, how do you feel, man? Are you excited?
Yeah, man. I'm, like you said, we've been with it for so long and everything and haven't been able to tell anybody. So the fact that it's out now and that people are able to read it and, see what we put together and see, this thing we put out into the world, it feels amazing. So I'm just excited for more people to be able to read it, to be able to share it, for kids to read it and connect with it.
Yeah, that's the most important thing is like, I really do hope that a lot of kids do. My mom thinks it's very nice, but I hope, a younger audience can find it and resonate.
Because I know like a big impetus behind it whenever I'm writing something for younger readers is like, what's a universal truth that I wish I knew at that age?
Right.
And the biggest one for this one, like the whole idea of it is like things change and you can't change that things change.
Get used to it, punk.
Yeah, exactly. So I felt like that was a big thing that, in this sort of context doesn't get talked about a lot. So I'm glad that we could put a story together that did that.
Yeah. Oh, wow. We've been going for 30 minutes. If I should say something about the questions, or is that,
I'm sorry,
I think we're going to move. He was just asking if it was time for questions. He didn't want to roll over. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. So I'd like to remind everyone who's watching, if you would like to submit a question, please click the text on your screen that says ask a question, or if you're watching from a phone or tablet, click the little icon with a question mark and you can submit your questions there. If it's easier, you can also throw them in the live chat. That's fine. While we're waiting, I thought if it's okay, Zach, on your website, there's this really cool Fearless Rider thing. Is that okay if I share a little bit of that? Because
yeah. What is it like? Does it look like it's some pages from the book?
Is that okay? You think?
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
I think we're allowed to show. What was it like? They said like 6 or 7 pages.
Yes, it's like just a tiny bit.
Yeah.
It's really like the close-up
throw it
of the jacket.
Oh, please.
Oh
Please,
my
I worked
God.
really hard
I
on
really
that
have to
jacket,
show the
guys.
jacket.
Somebody look at the jacket.
A lot of work went into the jacket. We got to show it as much as possible.
I'm not going to
That's
let
right.
this go. The jacket.
That's right. Okay. So
Oh, yeah. So
I'm
actually,
right here, and
crazy...
I really like what you do at the panels. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The crazy story is these pages have been slightly altered in the book. So if you do get the book, which you totally should, it's a great book. And you look at these pages, they're going to be slightly different because these are the pitch pages that Kenny and I did, which means these were completed before we even got the series picked up. These are from, I think, about 20 pages in. And the art style had to change to match like the art style of the book, which had been altered slightly because, it's probably not a great idea to say that less work was put into the book, but these pages, each one took me about 3 days just for the amount of detail that was in them. And if we were to do the book and have it done by the release date, I would not have been able to finish if I had spent the amount of time. Like, I was out here drawing every leaf, like really trying to sell it to a publisher.
You didn't put less work into it. Yeah, we just streamlined the characters a bit. Yeah, so if you can see, it's it's just a little bit more streamlined in terms of the design.
These panels were definitely some of my favorite to make, and were the easiest during actual book production because we already had these layouts done.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that might be kind of cool for people to see.
Yeah,
to hear the difference. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fun part of the process when you go through. A lot of times, stuff that ends up getting pitched ends up getting revised, so the pitch pages end up being changed down the road, or like story things will change, so they'll have to be completely redrawn or thrown out. So it's usually just for people to get a flavor of what the story is going to be like and get like a sneak preview sort of thing. But yeah, that redesign you did, Zach, reminds me a lot of how they streamed down the characters for Batman the Animated Series, like made them a little bit more streamlined and blockier as the show went on.
Lines.
Which is better for movement too, actually, from the old
and then I think a couple of the reviews have been comparing it to like an anime style or a manga style, which I can kind of see. I think I have a lot of influences from anime, but I really didn't think it looked that anime until I was reading some reviews and people were like, "Oh yeah, it looks like a more anime style," and I was like, "Oh, whoops."
It's just those simple, clean lines and that great motion and stuff you do. It makes people think it's animated while they're reading it on the page, my friend.
So I have a few questions while we're waiting for people to submit theirs.
Sure.
So since you're both artists, you're both comic artists, and Kenny, you can go first. When you're creating, what's your favorite medium? Is it digital? Do you prefer to use a computer or tablet? Do you prefer to sit at your desk? And of course, you start with your pencils, but then do you go to watercolors? What's the process there? What's your favorite medium to use?
Well, I actually only do the writing, so I don't actually do any of the drawing. I used to draw when I was younger, and I traded one skill for the other, just in terms of focusing. So I used to draw all the time, but in terms of that, I'm all digital now, just because I used to keep notebooks, but I would leave them places and then not remember how far I got into something, or I'd forget which notebook I was writing in. So I'm all digital now. I have a notes app on my phone that I kind of keep stuff to and then copy and paste that over. And a lot of times now, if I'm just out in the wild and like waiting in line somewhere and, you know, a scene or a line of dialogue pops into my head, I can open up my phone right there and open up the document there and write while I'm standing there, just and reformat it later. So I'm pretty much all digital now. Like I don't really use notebooks or anything anymore. Zach will have a way more interesting answer than me. But
No,
I
it's
just,
the same
I
answer.
do this thing.
I'm also all digital. I used to work traditionally, and then, you know, just for the speed, the general like kind of vibe of comics is it should look good, but it also needs to be done quickly. And you know, there's a lot of things that you can't do quickly when you're working traditionally on paper and needing to buy supplies, buy new paper, all that kind of stuff. If you get the computer, it's a big expense up front, but then it'll kind of save you some money in the long run. And also fixing your mistakes is a million times easier than buying whiteout, which I never really learned how to use right. Anyway. But yeah, all digital. Someday I'll get
Sorry, I
back
had
into
to
painting.
like shift my screen. The light is starting to come in and it creates this like blinding effect.
Oh, that happens to me too.
All right. And I was also wondering, at what point did you know you wanted to be artists/writers? Were you really young kids? Is that something you always felt you wanted to do, or was it something that you figured out when you were a little older?
You go first this time, Zach.
Okay. I mean, I've always known that I wanted to be an artist. I think since I was in like third or fourth grade, we had like this. I have this piece of paper somewhere in my room. I keep it with me, and it's like it was like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was like, I'm gonna be an artist. Like I'm gonna make comic books. Da da da. And then the older I got, the more I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't be an artist. Maybe I should like do something more practical. So my undergrad, I went for a Bachelor of Science in Digital Media. I was like, I'll do something with computer. There's money in computers, but I'm terrible at using computers. I barely passed my programming classes. It was just a wash. I was like, you know what? What I really want to do is art. So I went back to school. I went to SCAD for sequential art, which when I was a kid, I didn't even know that you could go to school to make comic books. That seems insane to me. But yeah, I feel like I've always felt pretty strongly about wanting to make art.
None on my end. I've always been super obsessed with stories as a kid. Like, true to the circle of life, I threw down a lot of money at the Scholastic Book Fair as a kid. So a lot of Goosebumps and stuff like that. Even just playing with like action figures as a kid, I always had these big sprawling stories that I'd like put a pin in and come back to as soon as I got home from school and just continue the same soap opera type thing. So at a really young age, I wanted to draw comics, but like I said, I just never developed all of my artistic skills. I was always more interested in the story part. So throughout high school, I taught myself as much writing as I could. I got as many books as I could about it. I originally wanted to be a screenwriter, so I worked as a ghostwriter writing screenplays and stuff when I was 18, 19. But then just kind of fell in love with comics again and realized like that was my first big passion as a kid. You should follow whatever it is you wanted to do when you were 8 because it's the most true thing that you could possibly want to do. So I got back into comics and like started to learn how to put it together and, found artists to work with and put out my own independent books. Then eventually started working for, like DC and stuff. So it's been a dream come true, but I've always wanted to tell stories and I'm not happy unless I'm working on a story.
We do have some questions that came in. Our first one is from Charlie. Thank you, Charlie. And it is, what was your first comic book you made? And we could start with Kenny this time.
Okay, yeah. So the first comic book I ever made was a black and white crime comic called Ink Ribbon, which was through a small digital publisher. It was a 22-page comic that I worked on with an artist from Japan named Ali Sasagawa. And I don't think it's available anywhere online, but I have like a giant box of them. So if I'm ever at a show or anything and have a table again when Comic-Con start up, I'll have them with me, and I sell them for like $1. I have 1,000,000 of them. So that was the very first comic I ever did. And then the first big comic that I had published was I did a tie-in comic for Witchblade, which was that old like 90s series. I won a new comics writing like talent hunt through Image and Top Cow and wrote one of their characters. So that was the first time I wrote like a licensed character. So those are the first couple comics I did.
I did not know that, Kenny. I'm learning new things about you all the time. The first comic I ever made was when I was like 12, and it was about a vampire who could only drink B positive blood, and it was called B positive.
How come we haven't done that book? That's great.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. But then I guess the real first like job I got hired to make a comic for was called Chrono Cadets. And it's like this all ages sort of history instructional comic that I did with my old friend Tommy Ruth. And it was a blast. It was a huge learning experience. It was my first comic right out of school. I made a lot of mistakes and I learned a lot of things very quickly, but my very first officially published book is the one that I did with Kenny. So this has been a very thrilling month for me.
Oh, wow. All right, we do have another question here. How does the comic art differ from the original concept art, and what changes did you eventually make along the way?
Well, that's a good question. So I guess Kenny, when we were first talking about the concept of the book, I had never done a children's book before, so I was looking at like, well, not exactly a children's book, but a younger reader book. So I was looking at more younger reader material, and I was like, oh, maybe I will try to adapt some of these styles. So I had it much more sketchy and loose and bouncy for the concept art. Also, I knew pretty straight away. I think Kenny was like, yeah, she should be like a redhead with like freckles. We were kind of like, that's sort of the vibe we want her to have, is like, people have a lot of associations with that type of character archetype. So I think from the very beginning, I was like, okay, reddish hair. And I felt pretty good about, my sister was a huge tomboy growing up. And I was like, I kind of want her to be like a tomboy because, her personality is very agender. It's very ambiguous. But yeah, I think the concept art was pretty similar to how we ended up with it maybe was a bit sloppier. I guess that's all.
Yeah, it was definitely a bit more sketchy in how you did it, but it is very close in terms of just simplifying it down, like we said, and doing the cleaner line style. A lot of the concepts, especially the color palettes, like the purples and pinks and yellows and everything in her costume, because the hero is like a motorcycle riding hero who's themed after a moth, and Zach had found this like beautiful moth. I forget what kind it's called.
Rose gold moth, I think they're called. They're like pink and yellow, and it was on my screen porch like the night that Kenny and I were talking about designing this character after a moth, and I was like, wow, this is very fortuitous.
Pure divine inspiration. Yeah, yes, just showed up, and I was like, you showed me a picture of that, and I was like, that's not a real bug. Like, I had to go look it up because I didn't believe you. Like, because those colors are wild, and those were just like the perfect colors to style like a heroic costume over. So that color combination like stayed even through like the design and everything of the logo.
You can see a little bit of the yellow on her T-shirt. I made sure that she had all of the colors of the moth visible as often as possible. So
that color palette.
I do wish we could have put the concept art like in the back of the book, because as a kid I remember like really loving looking at the concept art.
Yeah. All right. I have another question. So when you're beginning a new project, what are the very first steps when you have an idea? Are you an outliner? Or do you just start kind of drawing ideas? What's the process for any young people that might be watching and might be interested in creating themselves?
Sure. I'm real big into outlining, just because like with writing comics, you only have so much space to tell a story in the way that it works, since you have to think in terms of pages and panels. And when you're putting a book together, you're often given sort of like a page count width. With a novel, you can describe as much as you want in terms of real estate, but with a comic, you really only have like the canvas of the page to tell the story. Now you can still put whatever you want on there, like art wise and story wise, but you only have a limited amount of space, like a roll of film to tell a story. So I'm really big on outlining, and when I'm coming up with ideas, a lot of times I think of a visual. So I don't draw, but I am a very visual thinker and storyteller. So a lot of times when I'm listening to music or I'm just doing stuff, like my brain will just start throwing visuals my way. And it's like one side of my brain presents a visual, and then the other side of my brain, it's like, hey, what does that mean? And then the other side of my brain has to justify why I thought of that. And so like with Kara and Fearless, like I called Zach, like I talked about at the beginning, because I just pictured this girl riding her bike, and I was like, okay, what's she doing? I was like, well, she's running away and she's going to find her best friend, and she hasn't told anyone where she's going, and she thinks she's doing the right thing. So a lot of times it'll be a visual and some sort of nugget of a story idea, and from there I'll outline the whole story, come up with all the visuals that I think are important or sell stuff thematically. So there's a lot of outlining on my side in terms of before I will write. Now that'll change. I'm not beholden to the outline, but the outline keeps me in check in terms of knowing where the story needs to go, how she needs to get there, but knowing that if the character or the story fits in a better direction, I can always change it as long as I hit that same emotional ending.
Oh, yeah, I think, look, it's me. I usually, the process for me is just kind of following Kenny around until he has enough for me to knowing. We'll meet up at the very beginning when he gets these nugget moments. And he's like, this is the moment. Like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, do you want to like do this? Should I flesh this out? And like 9 times out of 10, I'm like, yes, let's flesh this out. Especially with like a newer thing that we're working on. Like, I'm very excited about it. I was very excited about Fearless. I get like very good feelings when he comes to me with like these very specific moments in his head, because I'll let him do his thing. Like, he's out there, manifesting as quickly as a human possibly can. It is almost astonishing sometimes how quickly Kenny produces scripts. And I'll be over here kind of working on things that I'm excited for. And I'll be like, oh, what if this happened? Like, I'll text him, a few days later, and he'll be like, yeah, that sounds good. And he'll just like, he'll be like, give me a minute. But it's a lot of fun. This is probably my favorite part of the process, is when we both get to like bat ideas back and forth, and I get to watch him sort of build the house that I will potentially live in for the next 2 years.
Yeah, I got to make sure it's exciting, because if you're going to be working on it for X number of years, you got to be, yes. So that helps keep the story exciting, because I know while I'm doing it, I have to keep Zach entertained while he's doing it.
Hard to do.
So I got to keep him on task and entertained and tell a good story. So he's my number one audience, because I have to keep him the most invigorated.
Oh my gosh. Well, it looks like that's it for our questions. I'd like to remind everyone watching, if you click the button on your screen that says buy the book, it'll take you to our website where you can buy a copy of Fearless. We still have some signed copies left. Zach was nice enough to come in and sign for us. So please pick up a copy and support the authors. Guys, thank you so much. This was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us.
Of course. And if you're ever in Pennsylvania, Kenny.
Oh, I'm going to bring him over here sometime.
I'll
drag him to the
I will
bookstore.
gladly come down there and just sign as many as you need me to and hang out in the bookstore. Happy to do it.
That would be awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Thank you both for joining us, and have a great night.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.